Okay, folks. Man, I'm so excited about this one. We had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Jesselyn Cook, who is an award-winning investigative reporter and journalism lecturer, and also an author who has written extensively about online conspiracy theories and their offline harm. Jesselyn has recently written a book called The Quiet Damage, QAnon and the Destruction of the American Family. And man, the book is amazing. Jesselyn is incredible. And Brian and I had the pleasure of sitting down talking to her about all things conspiracy theory and the way that it just tears people's lives apart. And the societal harm and the societal sickness that comes with that territory. So I hope you enjoy. This is a really top tier episode. We love Jesselyn. We hope to have her on the show again at some point in the future. So enjoy this. Stick around for after the episode where the guys and I get to have a little discussion about grievances and dopamine and how those things kind of intertwine and the ways that we kind of get a little bit addicted to our grievances. So enjoy, and we'll see you all on the other side. Okay. Brian, I know, I'm going to start it off. I'm going to start it off by saying this. I actually don't talk about my extracurricular study of conspiracy theories much on the podcast. It has come up time and here and there.
I don't like that you use the word study because I feel like you're validating your own conspiracy theories by using that word.
Okay. All right, fine. Do my own research or whatever the fuck you want me to say. But basically, I'm a big fan. I have always been a big fan of conspiracy theories. I actually have, there's a podcast idea that I've been sitting on for a while that I wanted to dive into, and the working title was "Make Conspiracy Theories Great Again." Now that might be in bad taste, poor taste, especially for this conversation. But I do have a love for certain conspiracy theories, and for me personally, it's been a fascinating form of like fun entertainment. And there's also some things that I subscribe to that some people might think is a little cuckoo, but I actually for real do have a very deep-seated interest and very deep belief in, which I also try not to publicly talk about much, which has to do with non-human intelligence, aliens, UFOs, whatever the fuck you want to say.
So just the caveat in that alone is do you feel like there are conspiracy theories that are not so dangerous, and then ones that maybe are more dangerous?
Well, no, I might get into that, but I just wanted to preface this by saying I do have a soft spot for conspiracy theories. But over the last few years, and this is where that makes conspiracy theories great again or fun again idea came from, is that over the last few years, conspiracy theories became not as fun as what I used to feel that they were. They became a little bit dark, and they became a little bit serious and not like fun and games and silly. And I don't know, maybe they've always sort of been that way, but there was some sort of like politicization that happened to conspiracy theories that kind of fucking ruined it for me and made me not want to talk about it with unless I was in close company with friends, and definitely not talk about it publicly on a podcast that goes out to thousands of people every single week.
And that's why you want to start this campaign to make them great again.
Well, no, that's what I wanted to say to introduce this week's guest, because we are going to be talking about conspiracy theories, but in particular, we're going to be talking about a conspiracy theory that personally I think not so fun, which is QAnon. Now, some of you out there might have heard the word QAnon before. Some of you might not have any fucking clue because you've been living under a rock, and congratulations if that's the case. But buckle up. Our guest today, Jesselyn Cook, who's an award-winning investigative reporter and journalism lecturer, has written a book. The book is titled The Quiet Damage, QAnon and the destruction of the American family. And I think we're going to be diving into a topic today that unfortunately is not as fun as what I probably set it up to be at the very beginning of this episode. So
if only we could make it fun again, though.
So Jesselyn, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to get into this. But before we get into QAnon and your extremely fascinating work, give us a little bit of insight into yourself. Who are you? What are you? What makes you you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about this with you guys. So, as you said, I'm an investigative journalist, most recently worked at NBC News. And a lot of my work is just driven by asking questions and trying to understand how big issues that maybe we look at through a lens of politics or public health are affecting people in their everyday lives. And that's kind of what led me into this work was, I think mis and disinformation have been these hot button words that have been kind of causing a lot of panic and a lot of alarm through a political lens for many years now, especially in recent years. And I had done a lot of reporting on the harms to democracy and how they, how false information can kind of upend our political processes. But I was really curious to know what was going on behind the scenes, out of sight, at home, when families are kind of stepping into different realities and being splintered. And so that was where I've spent the past 3 years, is kind of traveling around the country. I'm here in the US, and just trying to get a sense of what it's like to have someone believe in something that you know to be completely false. And when you see someone you love kind of slipping away into that world. And so that's what's been driving me. And that's been just the past project for me in recent years.
Yeah. So I one thing that just came up there that I'm just kind of curious about, misinformation, disinformation. Is there a difference between the two?
Mis and disinformation are both at the heart of it. It's false information, but disinformation is falsehoods that are spread with intent. So like people are actively lying to you and knowingly misinforming you.
Right. Okay, cool. So, all right. So we're talking about QAnon. For folks who, for the few out there that may not know anything about it, what is QAnon? Give us a sort of like brief history of like how it kind of, its beginnings and I guess the way it sort of, I don't know, it exploded into, like household name popularity among a certain demographic of people in North America, I guess, or maybe even I don't know, like globally at this point.
Yeah, it really has gone around the world, which is just mind-boggling. But QAnon started out in the fringes of the internet. You would not have heard of it 4 years ago unless you were extremely chronically online, hanging out in like 4chan, migrated to 8chan, 8kun. These are kind of forums that really aren't frequented by many people other than those kind of, many of them might be interested in extremist movements, just kind of lurking in weird dark corners of our web. And so it started out as this idea that Donald Trump was secretly working with Q, this mysterious government insider, to take down the deep state. And so the deep state is believed to be this cabal of elites, these global evil elites who secretly rule the world in the shadows. And it's made up of the richest and most powerful people among us. So we're talking like members of the royal family, Hollywood celebrities, government leaders, all
the Bilderberg group, the Bilderberg group. Sorry.
Oh yeah, like it's wild. This idea that these people we know and trust and look up to were working against us all along for decades, and so doing everything from poisoning us with vaccines to trafficking children, drinking their blood, eating them. The kind of thing you'll see in the media a lot is a Satan-worshipping cabal of pedophiles. That's kind of the nugget of it there. And so Donald Trump was working in secret to bring the deep state down. And then there was this online network of people who call themselves Anons. These are everyday folks who were receiving coded intel called Q drops from Q, this mysterious figure who would only appear on these like 4chan, for example, 8chan. So they would kind of try to decode Q's little nuggets of intel and try to understand this plan that Q and Trump were working on in secret to liberate humanity. But the interesting thing about QAnon is that, that's kind of its origin story. But today I would call it like this umbrella conspiracy theory of everything. Like every single theory out there can be stitched into it. And it has just been normalized to a degree that is jaw-dropping. Like it's been seeping into our politics, into the mainstream. It's been tacitly endorsed by everyone from Donald Trump to like very high-ranking members of the GOP here in the States. A lot of people have kind of nodded and winked at it without openly endorsing it. And so the statistics now are as stunning as the falsehoods. You'll see polling shows that about 1 in 5 Americans subscribe to some form of the QAnon belief system, which is more than double the population of Canada.
Holy shit.
The thing that I find so striking about this is like when you started explaining Q and QAnon, it sounds, for lack of a better word, ridiculous. Like it sounds so
like a
crazy.
Sick Tom Clancy book.
And hard. It
It
sounds so hard to believe.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like how does a movement that seems so crazy, from the outside, like how does it gain so much momentum like that? Like how do 1 in 5 Americans end up believing in something that is seems so unbelievable?
Let me ask this, because when you say 1 in 5 people believe in some semblance or some aspect of QAnon, how much of so again, like so speaking, I guess specifically about QAnon itself, the conspiracy theory that is QAnon, how much of QAnon has spilled out or like I guess like fertilized other elements of, whether they be conspiracy theory or like snake oil salesman type bullshit that's being peddled on the internet. I guess to be very specific, like, there's all these sorts of, like wellness influencers that end up, over the last, especially since COVID, like wellness influencers have sort of become, I don't know how to put it other than, almost like a seedling of QAnon, like they were born from QAnon, or they're peddling this shit that's just like totally wacko, like, whatever, drinking your own piss or whatever the fuck it might be. You're seeing these other things, and this is a little bit different, but like the trad wife movement, like these things that just seem so fucking beyond bizarre considering the time that we live in. How much, like, do you think that those sorts of things that we're seeing pop up, especially when it comes to like far right or more right leaning, extremist type views, when you say 1 in 5 Americans believe in some semblance of QAnon, do you mean those people as well, or are we really is that really honed into like Q and this idea of Q and Trump being like a fucking light worker or whatever it is, like what how when you say 1 in 5, like, what do you mean by that?
So that figure actually comes from polling from the Nonpartisan Public Religion Research Institute, which shows that about 1 in 5 Americans believe that the media, financial, and government worlds in the States are controlled by a cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles. I think I'm directly quoting there. But to your point, absolutely not 1 in 5 Americans say, like, I'm a QAnon believer. It's not like that. I think the branding has really faded. These ideas have just blended into the mainstream. And even like the word pedophile in American politics, you see that thrown around like so carelessly, just as a weapon to like harm a political opponent without any evidence of harm to children. But you're so right that QAnon has kind of just sunk its talons into all these different kind of offshoot groups. Like there's a lot of wellness mis and disinformation. There's a lot of pseudoscience that kind of just, it all kind of comes together. And that's what I meant by it's sort of like an umbrella conspiracy theory, because there are so many entry points into this. I think vaccine falsehoods were a really big one, because, the theories are false, but the fears are real. And if you tell someone that vaccines are a tool to like enslave humanity and kill us all, that's going to cause real fear, and that, a lot of people get sucked into this through like very legitimate reasons. Some of them have very pure intentions. They want to protect kids from pedophiles. They want to protect their loved ones from Bill Gates' poisonous vaccines, and so there are a lot of different kind of groups that peddle falsehoods that have seen an opportunity in this and have kind of found ways to capitalize on and make a lot of money through spreading these lies. So QAnon, I guess that term is used a little loosely now to cover a lot of different kinds of falsehoods, but it really all does get stitched into this one idea that the elites are working against us and they are all trying to harm us, from, poisoning our crops to, trafficking our children.
Right, right.
When you started looking into this, what did, in hindsight, looking back, is there were you able to identify the different sort of intersections that have led to this environment that's ripe for this type of misinformation and disinformation to spread?
Yeah, I think health mis and disinformation is a really big entry point. Certainly over COVID, we saw a lot of very real public health fears being exploited. But even, one character in my book, for example, she had a cancer misdiagnosis, and this was extremely traumatizing for her. And after she found out she didn't actually have cancer, she went on Facebook and she just found a whole web of people who also had traumatizing experiences with the medical system, and they all kind of came together and shared in each other's outrage, and they showed each other sympathy. But then there were these bad actors who said well, I have a miracle cure for cancer, or I can solve your depression with just this powder, whatever it is. There are so many people who take advantage of the vulnerable, and that's really what QAnon is, right? It's exploiting people. Either some politicians have kind of weaponized it for their political gain. A lot of people have peddled these falsehoods to make a quick buck. Some people just use it for clout and to get really popular online, and you can make money that way. But health falsehoods are a really big way in. And with COVID, the vaccine was just such an inflection point. There was such a scary thing. There were so many unknowns about it that, there were these information voids, and QAnon swept in and filled them with its lies very quickly before the facts could emerge. And here we are today.
Man, it's so isn't it not just the absolute fucking wildest thing that the thing that we are talking about on this podcast right now, that 1 in 5 Americans believe in some degree of it, could have just been started by some neckbeard in his basement, at 4 a.m. typing on his computer, just role playing, just LARPing. And then it turns into what it's turned into.
Yeah, it's
it's either that or it's real. I mean, it's one or the other.
If a butterfly flaps its wings.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It honestly is a perfect example of the butterfly effect. It is this thing that just has turned into something so massive. And it's, I don't know. It's just wild to think that if, does that person exist out there and just looking at the mess he made going, whoops, what did I do? I
think the thing that's interesting is when we look at this at a societal level, it's easy to look at it and think oh, wow, that's crazy. I can't believe that people think that. What a bunch of nut jobs.
Right.
But then when you start, as you did, Jesselyn, started to dig into the individual human experiences and the people who are personally affected by, their loved ones going down this rabbit hole and the impact that has on their relationships. I'm really curious what it was like for you to start to dig into those really personal stories and what it looks like at that level, because I feel like that does a really great job at capturing and showcasing to, the broader world, the audience, the broader audience, that how much of an impact this can have to someone's life and their relationships.
I guess for context, maybe just let the folks know, your book, you literally followed 5 separate families and explored how QAnon had an effect directly on these 5 different families. Give us a bit of insight into that process. Where do you start? How do you find families that allow you into their lives to kind of cover these stories?
Yeah, well, I mean, to your point, it is really easy to look at this and think these people are crazy and stupid. And, I So I grew up in Canada. I lived there until I was about 20. And when I moved to the States, which was just before the 2016 election, that was when Pizzagate was really blowing up. And I was like, holy shit,
right.
like Americans are insane. Did not see this in Canada. Like, whoa. And so that kind of got me interested in understanding, like, how do people get to this level? How does this happen? And, fast forward to 2020, I'd been reporting on disinformation, mostly like tactical political disinformation for a few years. But I ended up at this QAnon rally in early 2020. And it was like the craziest experience of my life. Until this point, QAnon had mostly been confined to the fringes. It was, I'd been writing about it for a while, but people weren't really attaching their faces to it. It was just looked at as really fucking weird. And at this rally, I was expecting like a couple dozen people to show up. There were 1,000 people marching down Hollywood Boulevard. They were waving these crazy signs. And I spent a lot of that day just talking to them, like trying to understand what brought you out here. I mean, there were families, there were little kids at this rally in QAnon shirts. And so this really got me thinking, like, okay, this isn't going away. This is really just starting to explode into the mainstream. We're seeing it. And so that led me to write an article for HuffPost, where I was working at the time, about children of QAnon believers and what it's like to have to try to, there are all these people online trying to become self-taught de-radicalization experts, teaching their parents right from wrong, true from false. And so I interviewed 9 of them for this big feature. And that kind of just opened up the gates. Like, after that piece published, I heard from people all over the country, all over the world. People were reaching out to me with their own stories of, like, my sister, my uncle, my dad, my kid just went crazy. Like, I know this person to be kind. I know them to be very smart. And now they're telling me that Hillary Clinton skins and eats babies. Like, what the hell happened? And so I wanted to understand that too. And so finding families to kind of embed in for this reporting process of my book was not as hard as you would think. And I think that speaks to the scale of this. There are just so many people struggling with this, and there's no visibility to it. Like, it's such a stigmatized issue that we don't really talk about it openly. And for the people who have lost loved ones, it's hard to even talk to a friend about that. Like, if your friend asks, how are you doing? It's hard to be like, well, not great. My dad thinks, like, Biden is running around, like, raping all these kids. Like, it's dark, it's gruesome, it's sad. And so I think because I had done a lot of reporting on this, people felt safe talking to me about it, which made it easier to kind of get the level of detail I did in my book. There was a level of trust that we had. So I just wanted to look at these stories in 3 parts, and that's how I structure my book. The first part of the book is looking at, like, who are the believers before QAnon? Like, were they always crazy? And the answer was no. Like, I spoke to hundreds of people in the process of writing this, but I chose to focus on 5 because you can't turn 100 stories into a book. It's just too much. But I wanted to see, like, who were they before? And time and again, like, these were just sane, happy, functioning, good people. What happened? Like, how did they get sucked into this way of thinking? Like, was there an event in their life? Was it just a gradual thing? And then the last part of my book kind of looks at, like, getting out. And some people do, which is hopeful. And then in other cases, getting out is more like the loved ones deciding, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't stand by you. I can't try to pull you out anymore. It's destroying my own life. And so I need to walk away. And for people who are fortunate enough not to know what it's like to have someone you love turn into, like, a QAnon believer or an extreme conspiracy theorist, that was one of the biggest challenges in writing this book, was trying to capture that level of pain, because it really is like watching imagine whoever you love most, maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your sibling, like, watching them turn into a stranger before your eyes, watching them just say shit that is so grotesquely false and, like, mind-blowing, and just dig their heels in when you try to help them. And a lot of the times, like, on your way down the rabbit hole, you're not just picking up crazy falsehoods, you're also picking up, like, really hateful stuff, like anti-Semitism, white supremacy. Like, you find all of that down there. And so watching someone you love kind of headfirst embrace that is devastating and confusing and maddening, because when you're trying to pull them back, you're often getting a lot of defensive hostility. And so that was the journey I took. And the one thing that I really learned was your IQ is just so often not a factor. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how much you think like this would never happen to me. A lot of it is really circumstantial that leads people to go all the way to like the baby eating Democrats level.
Wow.
It reminds me of, again, like we've talked about cults on the podcast before, and you know, one thing that we have tried to remind people over and over again whenever we're having those conversations is like people who find themselves subscribing to a cult, you know, like just devoting their whole life to a cult. They're not stupid people. They're victims. They're people that were likely in a position where they were vulnerable. They were in need of something or many things, and they found that need in a place that on the outset looked like a safe haven. And then you get swept up in it, and the next thing you know, you're giving away your life savings and like, you know, having sex with a guru that like tells you that, you know, you're all going to hop on a comet that's coming by in a couple of years or whatever. And I look at this situation with QAnon, and it's like yeah, of course, like not it's likely very much a very similar situation. You know, it can't there. Everybody who's subscribed to QAnon, like they can't all be idiots. It's way too big of a population of people. And this isn't the first time that we've seen things like this. I mean, I don't know, you know, like when you look at the satanic panic from back in like the 70s and 80s, I mean, that was a time where like that swept across America, where it was something wild, like 45 or 50% of all Americans believed that there were thousands upon thousands of satanic cults all around America, sacrificing children in these sacrificial like ceremonies that were happening, and it was typically babysitters that, you know, that were behind it, like snatching up the kid. Like people so many people believed that this was a thing.
I didn't know the babysitters thing.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. So like again, this is it's like a form of a mass hysteria that somehow is triggered. And I'm sure that there could be arguments made for how social media played a role, or I'm sure that you could look at, you know, the way that media in general has sort of played a role. But you'd said you've talked to you know, hundreds of people. I'm curious about whether or not you were able to identify some element that these people shared in common that, you know, like the only thing I can think of is like people that feel disenfranchised, people that feel like their leadership has failed them, or, you know, maybe they're struggling financially. I don't know. Like, I mean, you've spoken to these people. What is something that stuck out to you that you feel like maybe is a common link, or is it just too nuanced to be able to do that?
I think there is a common link, and I think you're getting at it. But like the families in my book, I really wanted to show that there's not one demographic box that like predisposes you to this. So we have like people in their 80s. We have tragically a boy as young as 7 who gets into QAnon. We have Black sisters. We have a very privileged, wealthy white lawyer who's very intelligent. We have even a Trump guy, MAGA guy, and a former Bernie Sanders supporter. So you can see people from like very different backgrounds are all kind of being drawn to this. And the common thread, despite their very different lifestyles, is this sense of powerlessness. And, you know, I think when we look at conspiracy theorists, like being one kind of demands a bit of a victim mentality, right? Because there's this big evil bad guy who's working against you, working against humanity, whatever it may be, your group. And so you have to believe and feel like you're being oppressed. And we can be conditioned to feel that way. Like the wealthy white lawyer, for her, it started when she was watching Fox News. Like every single day, she would hear these talking heads telling her, like, your rights are being trampled all over. The powers that be are coming for your guns. They're coming for your kids. There's the trans agenda. There's all this stuff that's coming to take away everything you hold dear. And so when you're conditioned to feel like a victim of the establishment, it's a lot easier to fall for anti-establishment conspiracy theories. But on the other end of the spectrum, there's, interestingly in the book, there are these 2 Black sisters who grew up in just extreme poverty, like in and out of homeless shelters, rarely knowing where their next meal was coming from, just very, very difficult lives. And one of them went on to become a Black Lives Matter activist, really big part of her community. The other one went into QAnon, like kind of embracing a lot of white supremacist ideology. And it was really difficult for them to understand each other's paths. But, you know, the sister who went into QAnon, she had always felt like, I just don't stand a chance in this world. Like nothing is fair. I see, interestingly, these girls, even though they grew up in dire poverty, they got a grant that let them go to a private school where they were just surrounded by white kids whose parents like picked them up in fancy cars. And then these girls would bus home to like basically the ghetto, and there would be like gunshots at night. And they had a very, they got to kind of peer into the better world that they didn't really have access to. And so they grew up understanding that life was not fair. And for one, that was kind of like, it lit a fire under her, and she wanted to make it better for people like her. And for the other sister, it was like, you know, I'm never going to be able to amount to anything. Life is the powers that be are always going to be working against me. And she's very like, it's a valid lens through which she looks at the world, because she never has had it easy. But QAnon for her just vindicated that. It's like, yeah, you never will have a shot. These bad guys are always out there, but it also presents a solution, right? Like the deep state can be toppled. Systemic racism, maybe not, you know, like that felt like too daunting, like all the factors that are kind of holding her in this difficult place. But Donald Trump is here to take on the deep state, and then life will be better. And that was really precious for her.
I'm curious, speaking of Donald Trump, and you know, obviously in 2016 when he was elected, there was the period of time where Trump was president, and it felt like at that time maybe that was when this was, you know, picking up a lot of steam. But then, you know, we heard the story that when Joe Biden is elected, that Trump will sort of go away, and that like radical right movement will be quelled, and the Republicans will like take back ownership of like the true Republican values that the party should embody. But, you know, with the election coming up now, and knowing that Trump is the presidential candidate and we're kind of headed back towards that time, is there like a sort of like second coming of this wave? Like, are these same sort of ideas picking up more momentum because of that?
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see like QAnon come back, like with the branding, and like, this online figure who's kind of at the heart of the movement, has gone dark for the past long while. But the ideas they have been so normalized in recent years that we see them kind of thrown around in our mainstream politics. And so I think they're already kind of at the fore, and we hear even, just to throw it back to the pedophile thing, like just in American politics, it's really disturbing how often you'll see these either outright accusations or insinuations that their political opponent is having sex with kids, like it's raping children. It's really disturbing, because it's such a baseless thing to say without evidence. It's horrific. But these ideas, even like that, you know, COVID wasn't real, or that it was all manufactured to enslave us all. Like these ideas a few years ago were so extreme, and now it's just kind of like something a lot of people accept as a given. And so I do worry, no matter which direction the election goes, like how it's going to play out, because, you know, even if Trump loses, I think his base is just going to really see that as like another stolen election, right? And we're just going to see a lot of unrest, to put it gently. And, you know, I know that there's similar stuff going on in Canada and elsewhere around the world, but it just feels like we are having a really difficult time as a society agreeing on what is true and what is false. And there are a lot of things that are gray and in between, but there are some things that really shouldn't be. And we still there's so much tribalism that I think for so many people, when your ideology becomes part of your identity, true and false doesn't really matter. It's more important to belong to the tribe than to stand for the truth. And we see that a lot. People just turning away from like smack you in the face reality and just sticking by whatever their political party or group accepts as true.
I like with the amount of, you know, the amount of time you've spent going deep into conspiracy theory territory. Have you put much thought into conspiracy theories as a whole, and how, you know, like, I mean, at the very top of the episode, I was talking about how, like, I actually find there's a lot of conspiracy theories that I just find really like fun and and as a form of like entertainment, you know,
And
like
this hasn't sounded fun.
I grew up on, you know, X-Files is like my favorite show of all time. You know, like I was a big X-Files guy. And that whole show is a fucking brilliant piece on conspiracy theory that is really fun. And so, but when I have conversations like this, I do have this like this small sense of almost guilt or you know, feeling wary of like, I don't want to publicly talk about my like love for certain conspiracy theories because of things like this, where you see these conspiracy theories that have like a detrimental effect on not just society, but or not just individuals themselves, but also like society as a whole. So do you have any, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on whether or not there's like value in distinguishing between conspiracy theories that are relatively harmless or ones that are, you know, pose significant risks to others? I guess the question I'm trying to ask is like, do you feel like conspiracy theories hold any sort of value?
I do. I think that even the term conspiracy theory is kind of thrown around a little too carelessly and weaponized and slapped onto things that people just don't want to be true. But, you know, healthy skepticism is really important. You should question what you're told. I mean, I'm an investigative reporter. That's what I do, right? But what I think we're seeing is like healthy skepticism is just giving way too easily to reflexive suspicion. Like people automatically assume that the elites, you know, the people who are in power are lying to us. And, you know, there's a lot of reason to feel that way. Like the government has lied to us a lot. And, you know, in having conversations with the families that I did, they point to like Epstein. Like if that was true, why is it so crazy to think that maybe the government is, or like these elites are trafficking kids or, you know, weapons of mass destruction? The Bush administration lied to Americans about that. There are so many things like the 2008 financial crisis with the big banks. There are endless examples of reasons that we should be suspicious. And I think, you know, to your question about like these less harmful conspiracy theories versus the ones that cause a lot of pain and I guess badness, for lack of a better word. You know, I think it's important to look at where it's coming from and what the motivation is in spreading it. You know, like sometimes it really does boil down to people just being curious and having good reason for being suspicious, or like, you know, when like with aliens, I think you mentioned earlier, like how could we possibly know everything that's out in every galaxy? Like we can't. But with these lies that are really permeating our political culture in the States, like a lot of the times, if you look at where they're coming from and you look at kind of the agenda of the person pushing it, like, you know, people who are lying for their own political gain, or they're like even foreign governments that try to interfere in elections by spreading disinformation and causing chaos. Like it's important to try to keep that part of it in mind and try to understand, like, am I being manipulated? Like, am I, you know, and the ironic thing, of course, is that QAnon will encourage a lot of the same, you know, ask questions, do your own research, be an independent thinker. And you should, that's all good advice. But once people get into that kind of QAnon type mentality, they only hear things that affirm their worldview. And they really are kind of in this echo chamber and they can't hear anything that might disprove their convictions. And so I do think, like, even, mis and disinformation, conspiracy theories, like, I think we've become desensitized to those words because they've been used a little bit carelessly and they've been used to kind of label people who we disagree with. And that's just as harmful, I think. You know, it's just causing more division, but we should be having conversations. We should be asking questions. We should be skeptical. We just also need to kind of try to understand, like, where we should have trust and ask questions also about the people we do trust, like what is your motivation for telling me this? And I guess I'm kind of talking in circles here because it's hard, right? Like asking definitively what is true and what is not has become such a difficult point for us as a society, obviously, like look at everything that's happening. But I think, you know, we we just need to have a little more empathy for each other and a little more empathy in each other's views. And hopefully we can come to some shared reality again. That's my hope.
Mm-hmm. I find it so interesting when it comes to the government. And I thought a lot about this during COVID with public health. It's interesting because the only power that public health has is if people trust them. If people don't trust what they're saying, then it sort of removes. If they're putting out an advisory notice and like asking you to do this or do that, and people don't trust them, then they don't really serve a purpose. And so we have to trust them. But when we start questioning every single thing that they do and don't trust them, then the system sort of falls apart. But there is this like fine line that you're trying to balance of like, okay, I want to have that healthy level of like skepticism and ask good questions. But at the same time, I have to sort of like let myself believe that they do have my best interests at heart. And then I guess it depends on the people that you've elected to be in those positions. And do you trust those people? And it feels really sad to me when I watch people, frankly, talk so much shit about government and these people who, in a lot of cases have, taken on those jobs because they want to make their city, their country, the world a better place. But they just don't have the ability to do that because people don't trust them anymore.
But again, like to that trust piece, it also really depends on, that particular person's history, or maybe their history's history, right? Like when we look at
like past traumas. And
the indigenous communities here in Canada, there's a lot of fucking reason not to trust your
100%.
There's a lot of reason not to trust your public health authorities. And that goes back generation to generation to generation. And so we're, and that's what we're hopefully seeing now is like more of a push to offer up education and guidance and like, open the doors for those communications between indigenous communities and, their health authorities by utilizing, training people on certain cultural values and cultural sort of approaches when it comes to healthcare, because they differ. They're very different from me, the white guy from Newfoundland who has CF, who just goes, yeah, give me, like, it's a drug that's going to help me, give it to me. I'll just take it and I'll just take your word
That's
for
why
it.
communications are like, good quality communicators are so important, and people that will engage with the people who disagree with them so that they can talk through those things that might make them feel uncomfortable. Because I think you're right. Like, I think that, and we talk a lot about, mental health and trauma on this show. And you have to appreciate the fact that these people that we're talking about, they're not dumb people. They're people who have either been disenfranchised or have past traumas or, as Jesselyn said, feel powerless. And so there's a reason why there's, and maybe a bunch of reasons why they're led to go down a certain path. But the way to get them back is not to just say, oh, that person's dumb. That's stupid that they believe in that, and sort of devalue their experience based on what they say they believe at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, to just out of curiosity, Jesselyn, like when we've talked to people about the effects of cults and people who have escaped and gotten out of cults, the process of coming back to some semblance of normalcy, or like, where you were prior to the cult, it oftentimes requires like this extensive psychological deprogramming type work. Out of the families that you've covered in your book, and I know that you mentioned that there were some like positive outcomes. What does that work look like? Someone going from like deep QAnon just down the rabbit hole, completely gone, able to come back to where they were, or come back to some sort of normalcy. What does that process look like?
I think when people get deeply into like the obsessive level of conspiracy theories, not just kind of like entertaining them for fun, but really like QAnon level, loved ones, the impulsive reaction is, they're spewing falsehood. So I want to give them facts. I'm going to fight fiction with fact. And that in theory makes a lot of sense. But what I found again and again and again through my reporting on this is that at the end of the day, the conspiracy theorist so often is not actually interested in objective truth, even though they may call themselves a truth seeker and they're like latching onto all these ideas. It's not really about the information itself. It doesn't really matter if Taylor Swift is a government psyop or if chemtrails are poisoning our skies. It's about what need, holding onto these theories serves. Like conspiracy theories serve different needs for different people. And what I mean by that is, for some people, it gives them a sense of community and belonging. For others, it gives them purpose. For some, it gives them hope. And just to illustrate with a quick example from the book, there was this dad who I wrote about who, had kind of laughed at conspiracy theories online for many years. He's like a very smart guy. He looked at Alex Jones stuff and kind of went like, guy's crazy. But when it came to him, there was a point at which it suddenly was able to draw him in. And it wasn't because he suddenly became stupid or he suddenly lost his mind. It was, in his case, he suffered a debilitating injury, and he went from, being the dad who would take his kids to the park after school every day and who would like romance his wife and was just a very active family guy. He became this man who was just stuck in a chair every single day, hour after hour. And that was really painful for him. He felt like he was stripped of his sense of purpose. He just could not be there and show up in the ways that he used to. And so, it just really devastated him. And then QAnon kind of opened the world up to him again. He got to show up online every single day as a digital soldier. He got to be contributing to this big cause. It was bigger than him. He got to be one of the good guys fighting the good fight. And even if there was a voice in his head that said to him, this isn't true, that was overpowered by just this desire to feel like he mattered again. Yeah. And that is so powerful, right? And so he wasn't stupid. He wasn't an idiot. And so anyway, to answer your question, to get people out of this, you need to look at how they got in. And most of the times it's not that they just wanted to know the truth and they were somehow convinced that these theories were accurate. It's that there was some underlying need that was unmet that pulled them in. In this guy's case, it was a sense of purpose and meaning. And so to pull someone out, you can't just debunk them out of their delusions that make them feel so good. You need to look at that need and try to meet it outside of QAnon, outside of the conspiracy theory. And so it was only when this guy, through like a very difficult journey, was able to fulfill his need to feel like he mattered again as a parent and as a partner. That was when these convictions fell away. He just didn't need them anymore. And so it was never about like convincing him that he was wrong. Now he sees that, he looks back and he's like, Jesus, like, what have I done? But it's because, he was unwell. And I think the reason we're seeing 1 in 5 Americans starting to go down these rabbit holes is not because there was just some magic wand that made us all idiots. It was just, we're not doing very well as a country right now. And there's a lot of reasons why we're not doing well. And people use conspiracy theories like a crutch. Some people use drugs and alcohol and gambling. Some people use conspiracy theories because it's an ostensibly less harmful way to make yourself feel good in so many different scenarios. And so the people who, you can have 2 people listen to a conspiracy theory and one falls for it, one doesn't. And I would argue that the person who doesn't is probably just like a more fulfilled person in their life, and it doesn't call to them in the same way.
It's crazy, the parallels between addiction and this like QAnon rabbit hole.
But it makes me think too, and when you say like, you can point back to that, like the reason why they got in. I imagine that maybe on the surface seems like it might be easy to do, but also through, my experience in going to therapy and starting to understand the reasons why I do things and maybe things I don't like about myself. And, it takes a lot of time and work to get to the real root of something. And oftentimes it may seem like, there's so many experiences I've had in therapy where I'm like, I do this thing. I don't like this. I think I do it because of this thing. And I feel pretty confident that this thing that I've identified as the root cause is actually like 5 layers removed from the real root cause. It's like, it takes like 5 or 6 therapy sessions going through like different stories that, like you go through the past story and then it's like, oh, well, actually there was something that led to me doing that thing in that moment that I thought was the root cause, but isn't. And so I imagine that, on the surface could seem like it's not too complicated to dig into. And maybe in some cases it's not, but I'm sure that there's some probably deep rooted issues that lead to that. And it makes me feel like it is probably a really challenging process to navigate.
I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but just in closing, especially after spending so much time with such a variety of people that have been affected by this, what advice would you give to individuals who are trying to help a loved one who might be caught up in some sort of harmful conspiracy theory, whether that be QAnon or, fluoride turning the frogs gay or whatever it might be?
I think in addition to looking past the what of belief to focus on the why, so try to just put the lunacy aside and try to understand what's calling to them about the conspiracy theory system, which again can be difficult. I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is to let this person keep their dignity. And what I mean by that is when someone is saying ridiculous stuff, it can feel natural to ridicule them. Like, that is stupid. That is fucking crazy. Shut up.
Yeah.
Like, you're being an idiot. And you see that all the time. And it's really heartbreaking because if the person who's deep down this rabbit hole feels like they can't come out, even if they realize, okay, I've been duped, like Trump was supposed to win the election, QAnon said so, he didn't, this has all been a lie. If they don't feel like they can emerge from QAnon, the rabbit hole, whatever conspiracy theory system it is, if they don't feel like they can come out still feeling loved and respected and valued, they aren't going to come out. You haven't left that door open for them because in their community, they feel accepted, they feel valued. There's an echo chamber. They're getting positive reinforcement all the time from people who share their views. And so that desire to just feel accepted and feel good is more powerful than our devotion to the truth, right? And so unless you say to this person hey, it's okay to be wrong. I'm wrong sometimes too. We can look back at this and we can put it behind us and you'll still be someone who I love and value and want in my life. Then you're opening the door for them and they can see themselves kind of exiting into their old community. But if you just make them feel stupid, you're not going to shame them out of this. You're just going to shame them deeper in. So it's hard. I know that especially when people get into this mindset, they can become cruel, they can become defensive, they can become hateful. And so it's hard to show them empathy. But unfortunately, it's like a necessary ingredient to kind of let them see the light and realize that there can be an after.
Mm-hmm. I can only imagine. Writing a book must be that to me. That just seems worse than moving. It just seems so. It seems like so much work. But to write a book about something that's so intense and so emotionally just heart wrenching and probably pretty tough to a tough pill to swallow day in, day out over the process of writing that book. Where are you at now? The book's been released. What's next for you? Was this enough of a project to kind of make you want to step back and find a new sort of avenue for your journalism and your investigative skills? Or did this just make you want to go even further down, a rabbit hole adjacent?
Oh man, the reporting process was really grueling and I did not go about it in the healthiest way. I could tell you a lot more of what not to do than what to do because it was rough. But there's one family in the book where there's this 7-year-old I had mentioned who, for him, conspiracy theories were just a path into his mother's arms. She was obsessed with QAnon. He just wanted to feel close to her. She was a single mom. And so he would sit on the couch with her and just watch QAnon videos day in and day out, and the world would become progressively scarier because QAnon puts kids as the center of victims of all these horrible crimes. And so anyway, in reporting that story, I was kind of alarmed by how little research there is into the harms of conspiracy theories on children, especially because kids are getting online earlier than they ever have before. They're spending more time online than they ever have before, and they're traversing the most complicated information ecosystem in our history. And so it just feels like a brewing crisis. And I have a toddler, right? I'm pretty concerned about what he's going to find when he does enter our digital world. And so I'm stepping away from reporting for a little bit to look at some of these questions through an academic lens. So I'm headed to Harvard in a few days, actually. I'm packing up my house right now, so I know the pains of moving. And I'm going to spend an academic year doing a Neiman Fellowship, trying to understand kids' online ecosystem a little better and think of ways that we might be able to meet them where they are and clean that up and try to proactively tackle this rather than waiting until another shitstorm. So
Wow.
that's what I'll be doing.
Amazing.
For a while.
We would love to have
Yeah.
you on next year.
Keep us updated
to talk about that
on
because
work.
that sounds
That's
really interesting.
fascinating.
Thank you. I love that.
Also, I just want to say, Jesselyn, if you're worried about what your toddler might find someday, at least maybe you can find a bit of comfort knowing that if they Google your name, they'll find
Yeah.
the reporting and the work
That's
that
right.
you've done.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Thank you. Yeah.
The book is available now, folks. The Quiet Damage, QAnon and the Destruction of the American Family. Where can people stay up to date with you and the work that you're doing, and what's next for you in the future? How can people follow along?
Twitter X is probably the best place to find me. My handle is @JessReports. So I would love to connect with you guys there.
Thank you. This has been just such a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to sit down with us, Jesselyn. Really, really, really fun. Well, Tay, unfortunately, you missed out on that conversation, but
super unfortunate because you guys have known I've been a
big Trump guy,
I've been a big Q guy
big Trump guy.
for a while,
Always waiting for his latest drops.
and I was hoping that this episode would come out and there would be some YouTube shorts with titles like Q guy destroys fake news author.
He goes home now to mommy and he gets reprimanded, and that's the end. Sorry, mommy. Sorry, mom.
Getting reprimanded. Missed the recording.
To embarrass your mom.
You
But
embarrassed
seriously,
us,
I
Tay.
am bummed that I missed it. I'm excited to listen
Yeah.
to the conversation because QAnon is it's
Fascinating.
a fascinating phenomenon
Yeah.
of this
So,
time.
Since that last conversation, guys, I got burnt. My lips are like
Yeah,
Yeah, bro, you've got
lips are-
you've got
do I
a
look-
you've
do I
got a
look red?
you've got a hue.
you look like you're. You look like
Trump.
you're. Yeah. Well, yeah. I was actually going to say you look like you're angry at the left.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a
You know?
fairly natural look because I know that the actual sun did that to you.
Yeah.
Whereas I think there's a whole spray thing situation happening
Definitely,
with
yeah.
Trump.
So, speaking of looking angry, this is what I wanted to dive into today with the wrap up. We'll try to keep this brief, but just a little heads up for you, Tay. One, I think we talked about this a little bit on the recording with Jesselyn, but afterwards we had a little discussion, and I was really interested in kind of like digging into the way that dopamine works when it comes to things like conspiracy theory or like even politics.
Mhm.
Because when we were talking to Jesselyn about like the work that she did, a lot of what I was hearing from her sounded like there was like a sort of easy way to correlate to kind of compare something like QAnon to like addiction,
Right.
or like alcoholism or something.
Like how
right?
we kind of like realized that social media worked in this way. So we
Yeah.
like optimized it for that. And
Yeah.
then people were like, well, let's just do the same thing for politics and conspiracies.
Or like the way that you're addicted to biking.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I suppose that's got a bit of a more healthy lean
a
to
little
it.
bit, yeah.
but-
So
But it can go too far.
it can go too far.
Sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Can destroy my bank account.
Yeah, and also, when you attach the Sibian to your bike, it was like that. That was like
Yeah.
a little too
Yeah.
far. But
Yeah.
whatever.
You don't mind eating the sausage, but you don't want to know how it's made.
So after we hung up later that day, Jesselyn actually sent me a link, and she was like, "Hey, I found this article based on sort of what we were talking about. You might find it interesting."
She did some of her own research.
yeah.
We love
found
that.
that.
We
So
love
this
that.
is an article from a guy named James Kimmel Jr. From Politico, and it was back in 2020.
Otherwise known as Jimmy Kimmel.
I was like,
that's it.
Jimmy?
So grievance addiction, how feeling wronged messes with your brain. So I guess like before I get into it, have you guys ever? Do you guys have like have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you're ticked off or like you want to vent, and it like
Not
And you
not a single no.
and you can't really let it go, and
Nope.
you just kind of like hold on to it, like maybe like a grudge or like something,
No.
Before I started going to therapy all the time.
Yeah,
Oh, you're,
Since
yeah,
therapy.
all the time.
you're
less.
cured now?
Not cured. I'm in recovery.
Right.
Remission.
This is
There
what
you go.
so I actually pulled up. I've got some clips of what our grievances kind of probably look like.
I was like, do you have Do you have video evidence of us?
Yeah.
freaking
I had
out?
less. I had less
Yeah.
grievances and more gripes. I think
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
okay.
nice. I like it.
Cool.
like a softer grievance.
One of Zaya's favorite books is called The Angry Grape, and it's really interesting. It's a really interesting tale of grudges and not letting things go.
All right. Well, this is what I feel like, Bri, and tell us what is like. Do you have an example of a grievance that you like kind of didn't let go of?
I
This is
yeah,
the visual
it's hard. It's
representation
hard
of
when you
that.
put me on the spot. But if I had to think of something,
Yourself?
wait, is it
Yeah.
play me, and then I'll tell you what I'm
All right,
experiencing
This
in
is
that
Brian
moment.
working out a fucking grievance.
I feel like this is us
For
at
folks
the.
just listening. Yeah, God.
I
yeah.
thought that was us at Walmart.
That was
You know.
a guy just snapping a keyboard over his knee.
I know the moment that I feel that.
Okay.
It's with the grocery store,
Ooh,
and it's
yes.
when you
I like this
walk
already.
down the aisle, and something that you bought 2 days earlier is all of a sudden 40% more expensive for no rhyme
Yeah.
or reason.
and you just and then you want to tell someone.
But I don't. I just steal that item.
Oh, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa.
I've
I
seen.
mean, I
your-
don't. I don't actually do that.
I've seen a version of you get very angry like that. It's not you. It's the other person that looks exactly like you, your twin brother.
Yep.
And I've seen him destroy a MacBook,
Okay.
and I've seen him
Terminator,
smash a
that is.
PlayStation.
Dennis is mellowed out.
All right. So
Very
Tay,
much
what
so.
about
He's
you?
more
Any
mature.
grievances that you can like remember like holding on to that you kind of like you didn't want to let go of, like felt good?
Oh, actually, you know what? I would have never thought of this, but for some weird reason, this actually came up. This is actually kind of dark and serious.
Well, I can see you getting more angry.
There was a guy in high school that I had heard through the grapevine that at a house party, this is actually serious,
Oh,
that he sexually assaulted somebody that
Oh.
while they were drunk, like
Oh,
and
God.
passed
Yeah.
out.
oh no.
And I was
You heard about this recently?
no. This was like
Oh.
while I was in high school,
Oh, okay.
and I
Okay,
could
that makes it
not.
better.
I could not let go of the desire to like beat the shit out of this person.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're Batman.
And I got really upset at multiple house parties around this guy and caused a big ruckus a bunch of times. And that I held on to that for like a year.
Were you like that? Is that what
And
you
it
said
was
to him?
like really
Yeah.
It was really aggressive.
Okay. All right. I didn't. So
I feel like that's like
Yeah.
I
The
feel
reason
like
that came
sometimes
up to-
grievances
I feel
are,
like that's
are
reasonable.
unjustified,
Yeah.
but I feel like that's reasonable.
The reason
That's-
that
I was
they-
kind of going for the unjustified. Like I
Yeah.
was looking for like I thought this is what would be like this would be Tay's grievance. Like he's
Olives.
doing work. He's doing work and just someone sends him an email. He's like, fuck. You know, that shit.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I took it to a
but
really
you-
serious
yeah, you
place.
took it.
And the reason that came up is that for some weird reason, I don't know why, I thought about that. I hadn't thought about that in years and
Yeah.
years, and
Yeah.
and I thought about it like a day or two ago,
Okay.
and so it was kind of top of mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So you thought about it, and okay. All right. Let's come back to that. I'm just going to show. I actually have video footage of me.
What's your grievance?
This is me. My grievance right here. This is
This looks fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow, dude, that hurts so bad. Oh my god, dude, that guy's
the funny
hand-
part is he couldn't break it.
Oh my god,
Wow, we just watched a guy full on punch
dude.
a car.
I do love.
And now he has to
Door,
go, and like he's
window.
almost certainly
I
American.
do love. road
Almost
rage.
certainly. I'm not going to say. He's either from anywhere in the U.S. or possibly Calgary, and
He knows Q.
he's
friends
very
with you.
upset, and he just cost himself an insurance claim
So
on his hand.
So this writer, James Kimmel, I'll just quote right from the article. He says, I'm a violence researcher and study the role of grievances and retaliation in violent crime. Recently, I've been researching the way grievances affect the brain. And it turns out that your brain on grievances looks a lot like your brain on drugs, basically scrambled eggs.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
In fact, brain imaging studies show that harboring a grievance, a perceived wrong or injustice, real or even imagined, activates the same neural reward circuitry as narcotics.
Wow.
This isn't a metaphor, it's brain biology. Scientists have found that in substance addiction, environmental cues such as being in a place where drugs are taken or meeting another person who takes drugs cause sharp surges of dopamine in crucial reward and habit regions of the brain, specifically the nucleus accumbens and dorsal striatum. This triggers cravings in anticipation of experiencing pleasure and relief through intoxication. Recent studies show that similarly, cues such as experiencing or being reminded of a perceived wrong or injustice, a grievance, activates the same reward and habit region of the brain, triggering cravings in anticipation of experiencing pleasure and relief through retaliation. To be clear, the retaliation doesn't need to be physically violent. An unkind word or tweet can be very gratifying.
Wow.
Oh, tweets. So
Right?
there's lots of those flying around.
There's a lot of that.
That is true.
Yeah.
For a period of time, I was only complaining on Twitter to like customer support people. You guys, I have
I know that you have a
I think
special place for
you.
customer
that's my
support.
other, and it's not
Yeah.
the person, and I'm never mad at the person.
It's the system.
It's the system.
Smug,
Yeah.
sanctimonious bitch.
It's
It's
the
you
institution.
talking to any customer service agent.
Brian cost us our business having a credit card for 2 years
Yeah,
because
well,
he freaked out.
He
lost didn't-
his fucking mind.
I didn't lose my mind.
Ugh.
I was just upset at
Brian,
the
you know what?
injustice.
Actually,
You know what?
blessing in disguise, you made us run our business with the cash that we have.
That's it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
could
Exactly.
not borrow
Silver
a
lining.
dime,
You know
even
what-
at a 20%
You know
interest
what's
rate.
interesting, guys? This is serious too. I had therapy last week, and I was talking about empathy, and I'll save you the whole story of like going into the whole
Please.
part of therapy
Please,
where
please.
we discovered
Yes.
this.
Well,
But
I'm begging you, please.
but I was
Hold on.
meeting.
Were your parents divorced? Did your parents get divorced
Yeah.
at some point?
There's I don't know a lot about this, but like my understanding of this thing that we were doing in therapy, it's called parts work, where you're like identifying the different sort of
Our
parts that make up you.
Dude, we just dived deep into this on Turn Me On.
Sweet.
This coming week's episode of Turn Me On
I think if
is-
that happens
is-
with
I
your
would love to
therapist,
listen to
I think if that happens with your therapist, you're supposed to tell a grown up.
is deeply we deeply dived into that. It's very fascinating. You're all the parts that you're made of.
Totally. Yes.
yeah.
It's very much like Inside Out.
Yes, dude. Yeah.
Which is so adorable to think
It's a
of
really
yourself
cool.
like that.
It's the first. It reminded me a lot of Gabor Mate in our conversations with him.
Totally.
Like
And
the way that he stated like the thing that you see about yourself that you don't like about yourself is like your stupid friend that
Yes,
showed up
yeah.
for you back in the day when you needed them to protect you that way, but they just didn't have all the faculties and they didn't know. So it's like not judging that friend that shows up and saying, I don't like them.
Mhm.
It's just recognizing, hey, they didn't really do the best.
But one thing that I thought of is
Mm.
you have stupid friends, but you also have good friends.
Yeah.
You know, that make up part of who you are. And
Yeah.
so I was digging into empathy.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's a really like strong governing part of who I am.
Sure.
But I found out that
You
empathy.
need to cut me out of your life.
yeah, that's what my therapist said. She was like, "Do you have a friend that is like the opposite of that?" And I was like, "Yes."
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
But the interesting thing that I learned about empathy is that there's a big root of empathy that is justice, which is really interesting. Anyway, we don't have to go into it now. We can talk about it later. But it is like it's this feeling of like, so like my feeling of empathy is I want other humans to like have a positive experience in
Ooh.
a situation.
Ooh.
But sometimes when that means like you watch somebody suffering, you want to stand up for them. And that means that it's like this sense of justice. Like there's this imbalance, like this person is being, treated unfairly. So your motivation for empathy is the fact that things should be balanced and good.
Ooh.
And it kind of leads into like the OCD type part of your brain where it's like, oh, this thing is out of place. Like this person is experiencing this thing that they shouldn't. So I want to change that. Like I need to manage that. But it starts to like overtake the way that you act in relationships because you don't want anybody to be upset. You don't want to like rock the boat. So you start to like, suffer yourself so that the other people don't have to. But that's like kind of a figment of, or like a creation, something that
Right.
might not actually be true.
Yeah, well, back to this grievance thing and the brain chemistry. One of the things that makes it really interesting is that because this feeling of being wrong can trigger that dopamine release, it makes a lot of people seek that feeling out again and again and again, which is like ties back to like holding on to like a grudge and like like
Kind of like when you're
thinking about
in junior high and like you're kind of feeling sad because the girl doesn't like you or whatever, but like for some reason you're kind of like addicted to the
Yes.
to like the
Right.
oh, this hurts.
Yeah.
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 So you just
listen
listen
to
to
So you
sad
start
sad
listening
songs.
to brand new.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
you just listen to screamo and like you're just like you kind of love it, but it's so
Yeah.
painful.
Well, here's another little interesting quote from the article. Grievance, like a narcotic, demands even larger doses to deliver its high. So you're kind of like always going for, like, when you think about like, oh, I fucking should have said this in the argument or whatever, and you're like in the shower just like running it through your head. It's like, well, you gotta like play it out even more to get that fucking release. And it's like,
Oh, that's
Man,
fascinating.
this
It is
this
very
is
fascinating.
the like underlying thing that's like taking over the way that
Well,
people feel about politics.
so this mechanism
Wow.
helps explain why grievance can be so powerful on a large scale, influencing group behavior and even political movements.
definitely.
This
People
feels
bond over shared grievances, which can create strong in-group identities, which just increases the otherness and that sort of like tribal mentality of like the other is the enemy, and let's fucking
Crazy.
freak out about
It's so
this.
crazy that people who believe in like one political or like support one political party can't acknowledge something good the other side
Mhm.
did. Like there has to be, I mean, even if you disagree entirely, like if I disagree entirely with Donald Trump, there's got to be something, like one thing that I look at and go, "Oh, well, that was a good thing though."
of course. Well, there is.
Whoa, dude, whoa.
You just have to go. You
Whoa.
just
But
have,
that's the
you
thing,
just have
is
to
that,
go
like-
through the policy and like.
Right?
But people don't. People generally, I mean, people generally are not. They're not thinking about the idea. They're thinking about the person. They're thinking about the
Ooh.
person that said it. So like, it really doesn't matter what the idea is that comes out of a person's mouth. It's that it came from that person's mouth.
Ooh.
You know, so you could say the most factual thing on planet Earth, but if I hate you, and you say the factual thing, there's like a mechanism that's just like it can't be true, or
Ooh.
there's got to be some sort of angle here that is, trying to screw me over or screw somebody over that I support or love or whatever. And it's like just because the person said it, or the person who represents the thing, like a political party or whatever. So like, yeah. I feel very disconnected from the world in general, and this is actually a really interesting insight for me in terms of like why I feel disconnected. Helicopter going by. Why I feel disconnected, why I might feel disconnected, because like I had lots of grievances and grudges when I was like a teenager and when I was kind of an aggressive, athlete in my youth. But like after yoga, like getting into yoga as like 20, 21-year-old, like I can't even really think about holding grudges or grievances in the last like 10 years. So like maybe this is why I feel so disconnected from the world, because the world is like one big grievance machine at the moment from like a political social.
Yeah, well, I mean, the big sort of like reason why I wanted to kind of dive into this, and especially after our conversation with Jesselyn, was basically just to land on the conclusion that, next time you find yourself stuck in like a loop of frustration or anger or resentment, maybe it might be warranted depending on the situation, but also it's a good opportunity to just stop and check in and kind of assess, is this just a fucking dopamine? Is this just like it feels good and I'm gonna keep doing it? Because if it is, might be worth just like taking a step back and just reassessing whether or not this is really valuable for you. If this is really going to like improve your day.
Almost never.
I
Almost
really
never,
feel that
yeah.
in the sense that like when
But again, to your thing of like,
Yeah, almost. It's almost.
but
never.
when you asked me like what my grievance was,
or if someone
and I
cuts you
thought
off,
of the grocery
if someone
store,
cuts you off on the fucking highway,
or someone cuts you off when you're speaking,
yeah, that too, dude. Fuck, I hate that.
so
It's the worst.
I was
It
saying,
really,
I
like,
also
it's,
agree,
It's
yeah.
just the absolute
Yeah.
fucking worst.
So
So
I was
anyway,
saying-
thank you guys
so
so
I
much
was
for listening to
saying-
the podcast today. If you, no, go ahead.
but like when
we
you
do got to wrap this up, Brian.
when you're talking about my grievance in the grocery store, I wanted to like I felt like I wanted to tell you how much I like am frustrated at that experience.
Who are you frustrated? Are you frustrated at the label?
He's
Is
frustrated
it
with
the number?
No,
He's
I'm frustrated
frustrated with the
people who
choice of the
decide
president.
that they that they decide that
The
they're going to
CEO
mark
of
something up.
Sobeys?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
frustrated with the
President's
Who is that?
choice.
I don't know. Let's find out. It's any of the big box.
Let's find
grocery
Michael. Michael. Oh wait. Sorry. This is a different guy. Oh, sorry. This is somebody else. But fuck this guy too. Michael Medline. Fuck you, dude. Like you fucking suck.
That
brother.
feels good.
Oh wait, no. This is the
We
guy.
just
This is
kind
the
of-
right guy. Yeah, he's from. He lives in Toronto. Get him.
Jared, I think we missed the whole point of the.
Wow, we just want
this
to really
piece.
put a disclaimer on that. We totally don't mean that. We totally don't mean
what I was trying to say is that I want to go down that path of bashing that person because it feels good, but I don't think we're supposed to. I don't think we're supposed to.
It's a joke, everybody. It's a joke.
Okay, actually, you know what?
Fuck you, Michael Medline.
Taking a breather.
All right, thank you everybody so much for listening to the podcast today, and I hope that I hope you learned something. I hope it's good. Let's just all take a breath.
Okay, donut, relax.
That's right. Yeah, flush it. Donut, chill.
Okay.
Donut, chill. All right, thank you all so much for supporting the podcast. This is fun. We're going to be back next week with another fun, engaging conversation. So if you want to support the podcast, you're doing it right now by listening, but you can keep doing that by telling somebody you love to listen to the show.
Mm-hmm.
You can also come join our wonderful little Discord community. The Discord link is in the show notes. And of course, if you're listening to this on any audio platform that has an option to subscribe or comment or like or thumbs up, whatever, hit it, do it. We love it. And how can people get in touch if they want to be on the show?
If they want to be on the show, they can go to sickboypodcast.com and fill out the guest form. And then might be on the show.
They can do that. And thanks, as always, to the folks who helped make the show happen. Huge thank you to Jeff Lonis, Rich O'Coin, Donovan Morgan, everybody else. We love you all.
That is it for this week.
I'm Brian.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jeremy, and this is Sickboy.